They asked him for a child, and the shy rancher didn't know how to answer. Ethan had always been a quiet man. He lived in a small town surrounded by rolling fields, wide open skies, and the gentle hum of nature. Life on the ranch had been his world for as long as he could remember. From the moment he woke up in the soft light of dawn to the time the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, his days were full of simple, steady routines. He liked it that way. There was comfort in the predictability of life, in the rhythm of feeding the animals, fixing fences, and checking the water troughs. The ranch was not just a job for him. It was a sanctuary. It was the place where he could think, breathe, and feel at peace. The ranch itself was modest but sturdy. A single-story farmhouse with a red roof sat at the center, surrounded by acres of green pastures that stretched as far as the eye could see. Wooden fences lined the property, protecting the cattle and horses that grazed lazily under the morning sun. Ethan had inherited the land from his parents, who had been kind and hard-working people, and he felt a deep connection to every corner of the ranch. Each fence post, every patch of grass, and even the barn smelled of history and care. He took pride in maintaining it, not for anyone else, but for himself and for the animals that depended on him. Ethan was a shy man, not the kind to speak loudly or make a scene. He had friends in town, yes, and neighbors who would greet him warmly when he passed by the general store, but he never lingered long in conversation. Words sometimes felt heavy in his mouth, and he preferred listening over speaking. People respected him for his kindness, his work ethic, and his honesty. They knew they could rely on Ethan for a helping hand, whether it was mending a broken fence, rescuing a stray animal, or offering advice on raising livestock. Yet despite his helpful nature, Ethan kept most of his thoughts and feelings to himself. The town itself was small and close-knit. Everyone knew everyone else, and news traveled fast. People exchanged greetings and smiled at familiar faces on the streets. Children would wave at Ethan as he passed by, and some would run after him to ask questions about the horses or the cows. He never minded their curiosity. In fact, he enjoyed their innocent fascination. It reminded him of his own childhood, when he had spent countless hours exploring the pastures, climbing trees, and helping his father feed the animals. Life had been simpler then, filled with wonder and discovery. Ethan's mornings began early. Even before the sun rose, he would be up, checking the cattle, feeding the chickens, and making sure the horses had fresh hay. He liked the quiet of the early hours when the world was still asleep, and only the sound of hooves, birds, and the wind filled the air. It gave him time to think and to enjoy the beauty of the natural world. Sometimes he would pause for a moment, leaning against a fence post, letting the cool morning air brush against his face. He loved these small moments of solitude. They reminded him that life, no matter how routine, could be peaceful and meaningful. After tending to the animals, he would take care of the ranch chores. Fixing fences was one of his favorite tasks. There was something satisfying about the rhythm of hammering nails and tightening boards. Each repair was a small victory, a way to keep the ranch safe and functional. Ethan was meticulous. He checked every corner, ensuring nothing was broken, nothing was missing. The work was hard, yes, but it was honest and fulfilling. It was a life built on effort, patience, and care. Despite his satisfaction with ranch life, Ethan sometimes felt a quiet loneliness. He was used to being alone, and he liked it most of the time. But occasionally a sense of longing would creep in. He would watch families walking together in town, children laughing, neighbors chatting over fences, and he would feel a subtle ache in his heart. Not a sadness exactly, but a reminder that connection was something humans naturally sought. Ethan was careful not to dwell on it too much. He knew he could not force relationships or change who he was overnight. Still, those fleeting feelings reminded him that life could be richer when shared with others. One particular day, while Ethan was mending a fence near the pasture, he noticed a pair of newcomers walking along the dirt road leading to his ranch. They were a young couple, probably in their late 20s, who had recently moved to the area. They waved at him enthusiastically, and Ethan offered a small, shy wave in return. The couple approached, smiling warmly, and introduced themselves. Their names were Sarah and Michael. They had been drawn to the town for its peaceful surroundings, hoping to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. They were eager to learn about ranch life and seemed genuinely interested in Ethan's work. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Michael became regular visitors. They would stop by to ask questions about the ranch, offer to help with small tasks, or simply chat with Ethan while he worked. Ethan found himself enjoying their company, even though he remained reserved and cautious. There was something comforting about their presence, a gentle energy that did not demand too much, but offered friendliness and warmth. He liked listening to their stories about city life, their hopes for a future in the countryside, and their laughter, which was bright and genuine. Despite his growing fondness for them, Ethan remained careful not to reveal too much about himself. Sharing personal thoughts and feelings was difficult for him. It was not that he did not trust them. He simply had never been the type to open up easily. Life had taught him that solitude was safe, and while he yearned for connection, he also feared vulnerability. Nevertheless, the couple's kindness slowly chipped away at his walls. Their sincerity and patience made him feel valued and respected, even in silence. The ranch continued to thrive under Ethan's watchful eye. Seasons changed, bringing new challenges and new beauty. In spring, the fields turned vibrant green and calves were born. Small and wobbly on their feet, Ethan would watch over them, ensuring they were safe and healthy. Summer brought long, warm days, perfect for riding horses across the pastures or repairing fences in the golden sunlight. Autumn painted the fields in shades of orange and brown, a reminder of the cycle of life and growth. Winter blanketed the ranch in snow, quieting the world and giving Ethan time to reflect by the fireplace in his modest farmhouse. Through all these changes, Ethan remained a constant presence, dedicated to his work and to the life he had built. He knew the ranch like the back of his hand. Every animal, every tree, every fence had a place in his heart. Yet, as he moved through his days, he sometimes wondered what it would be like to share his life more fully with others. He did not have the words to articulate it, and perhaps he had never allowed himself to hope for more. Still, deep down, there was a small flicker of curiosity, a sense that life might hold something unexpected just beyond the horizon. It was during one of these quiet mornings, as Ethan was repairing the fence near the barn, that Sarah and Michael approached him again. They carried a basket of fresh bread and fruit from their home, offering it as a friendly gesture. Ethan accepted politely, grateful for their thoughtfulness. As they talked, he noticed a warmth in their eyes, a sense of trust and admiration. He felt a mixture of comfort and unease, unsure why he was suddenly aware of their presence in a way he had not been before. Something unspoken hung in the air, a quiet tension that neither of them addressed but that Ethan could sense. As the day wore on, Ethan returned to his chores, but the image of the couple lingered in his mind. He found himself thinking about the conversations they had, their laughter, and the way they seemed genuinely interested in his life. He wondered if they understood how private and reserved he truly was, and whether they could accept him as he was. The thought made him both anxious and intrigued. He realized that life on the ranch, though fulfilling, had been solitary for so long that the idea of opening up to someone else felt both exciting and terrifying. By evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Ethan paused at the edge of the pasture. He leaned against a fence post, letting the cool evening air wash over him. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine a different kind of life, one that included companionship, laughter, and shared experiences. He did not know if it was possible, and he did not know if he was ready, but the thought lingered like a seed planted in fertile soil. Ethan returned to the farmhouse, completing his daily chores with a sense of quiet reflection. He fed the animals, checked the water troughs one last time, and sat down at the small wooden table for a simple dinner. The day had been long, yet fulfilling. Still, his mind was restless, filled with the gentle echo of conversations and the warmth of unexpected friendship. He realized that life, no matter how routine, had a way of surprising those who allowed themselves to notice. And in the quiet of that evening, as the stars appeared one by one in the sky, Ethan felt a tiny shift within him, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, his life was about to change in ways he had never imagined. Ethan had grown used to the quiet rhythm of his life on the ranch. Each day, the cows needed feeding, the fences needed fixing, and the fields needed careful tending. It was a simple, predictable life, one he had learned to cherish. Yet, over the past few weeks, the arrival of Sarah and Michael had brought a small ripple into his otherwise steady world. Their visits were friendly, full of laughter and curiosity, and although Ethan remained reserved, he found himself looking forward to their presence. They had a way of brightening the ranch without demanding too much, and he admired that. One warm afternoon, the sun hanging low and golden over the fields, Sarah and Michael approached him with an unusual sense of purpose. Ethan was repairing a broken fence post near the edge of the pasture, hammering slowly but carefully when they walked up carrying a basket of apples and a small loaf of bread. They greeted him cheerfully, as always, but Ethan noticed a slight nervousness in their expressions. It was different from their usual light-hearted visits. "Ethan," Sarah began, her voice soft but firm, "we wanted to talk to you about something important." Ethan paused mid-swing, the hammer held in his hand. He wiped the sweat from his brow and gave them his full attention. There was something in her tone that made him uneasy, a sense of seriousness he hadn't heard before. Michael stepped closer, his eyes kind but steady. "It's not easy for us to ask this," he said, "but we feel like you're the only person we can be honest with about it." He had never expected any conversation to feel so heavy while working on a fence. He set the hammer down carefully and nodded, signaling that he was listening, though he had no idea what was coming next. Sarah took a deep breath and continued, "We've been trying to have a child for several years now. Doctors have told us that it's unlikely we'll be able to conceive naturally." Her eyes searched Ethan's, looking for understanding. "We know this might sound strange, but we were wondering if you would consider helping us. We want you to be the father of our child." The words hung in the air like a sudden storm. Ethan froze, his mind blank for a moment. He had never encountered a question like this before in his quiet life. His instincts, his training to be polite and calm, and his shy nature all battled inside him at once. He didn't know how to respond. The hammer in his hand suddenly felt heavy, as if it symbolized the weight of the choice they were asking him to make. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His mind raced, thinking of all the consequences, responsibilities, and life changes this request would bring. He had lived a solitary life for so long, a life built around the rhythm of the ranch, the animals, and the land. Suddenly, he felt as though that life was fragile, balanced on a knife's edge, and someone had asked him to step into a world he had never imagined. Sarah and Michael waited patiently, sensing his hesitation. They did not press, did not try to convince him, but the gravity of their request was clear. They had trusted him enough to ask, and that alone struck Ethan deeply. He admired their courage but also felt the heavy weight of their trust. What they were asking was enormous. To agree would mean embracing a responsibility he had never trained for, one that could alter the course of his quiet, predictable life forever. Ethan's first reaction was confusion. He thought of the ranch, the animals, the routines that filled his days with meaning. He thought of the isolation he had learned to accept, the comfort in solitude, and the small joys he found in his own company. Could he really step into a role that demanded not just emotional commitment, but also physical? He didn't know if he could. As he looked at Sarah and Michael, he noticed their genuine expressions, the hope in their eyes, the quiet vulnerability in their posture. They were not demanding, not pushing him. They were simply sharing a need, a dream that had eluded them for years. Ethan felt a mixture of compassion and fear. He wanted to help, to do something good, to make a difference in someone else's life. But the fear of stepping into the unknown, of altering the comfortable life he had built, made him hesitate. Ethan excused himself politely, saying he needed a moment to think. He walked a few steps away towards the shade of a large oak tree at the edge of the field. He leaned against the rough bark, breathing deeply, trying to calm the sudden rush of thoughts and emotions. He remembered the many mornings he had stood here, alone, watching the sunrise over the fields. Those mornings had always brought him peace. But now, peace felt distant, replaced by the whirlwind of decision, possibility, and responsibility. He thought about his parents who had raised him on this very land. They had taught him the values of hard work, honesty, and kindness. They had also instilled in him a quiet sense of responsibility, not just for the animals or the land, but for the people around him. Ethan realized that this moment was testing everything he had learned about care and courage. He could not run from it. He had to face it honestly. As the afternoon sun warmed the fields, Ethan wandered through the pasture, thinking carefully about the request. He thought about the potential joys of helping bring a child into the world, of witnessing the growth of a new life, of forming a connection that went beyond friendship or casual kindness. Yet every thought of joy was accompanied by a shadow of fear. Could he handle the emotional weight? Could he maintain his identity, his love for the ranch, and the solitude he had always valued? Could he navigate the complexities of human relationships in a way that was fair and responsible? Hours passed as he reflected. The cattle grazed quietly in the distance, the wind rustled the leaves, and the world continued its natural rhythm, indifferent to his inner turmoil. Ethan felt torn between his instincts for a quiet life and his emerging sense of empathy and moral responsibility. He realized that avoiding the question would not bring peace. This was not something he could ignore or sidestep. The couple had trusted him enough to ask, and that trust demanded careful consideration. That evening, Ethan sat in his small farmhouse, the sky painted in deep hues of orange and purple. He made himself a simple dinner, though he had little appetite. His mind replayed the conversation with Sarah and Michael over and over. He thought of the fear in their eyes, the hope they carried, and the courage it must have taken for them to approach him. He thought of the quiet nights on the ranch, the stars above, and the life he had always known. The juxtaposition of these two worlds, the life of solitude and the life of shared responsibility, felt almost unbearable. He realized he needed more time, more reflection. He decided not to give an immediate answer, knowing that a rushed decision would be unfair to both himself and the couple. He resolved to speak honestly with them soon, but only after fully understanding his own feelings and fears. He wanted to ensure that whatever choice he made, it came from a place of sincerity and thoughtfulness. Over the next few days, Ethan's life took on a subtle tension. Every task on the ranch, from feeding the animals to repairing fences, felt slightly different. The wind in the fields, the sun on his back, and the quiet sounds of the animals reminded him of the calm life he cherished. Yet the memory of the request lingered, like a gentle but insistent whisper. He found himself imagining scenarios, thinking about what life would be like if he agreed, what life would be like if he declined, and how each choice would affect not only him, but also the couple who had trusted him. Ethan began to understand something profound. The choice was not just about helping Sarah and Michael. It was also about confronting his own fears, examining his values, and testing his capacity for empathy and courage. He realized that life, even on a quiet ranch, had a way of presenting moments that demanded growth, bravery, and deep reflection. This was one of those moments. By the end of the week, Ethan knew that he had to respond. He could no longer allow the uncertainty to weigh on him without direction. He had spent hours walking the fields, sitting under the oak tree, and thinking through every possibility. He had talked quietly to himself, even confiding in his dog, who listened patiently and offered silent companionship. Ethan had faced the fear of the unknown, and now he understood that the choice he made would not only shape the couple's future, but also his own. One afternoon, as Sarah and Michael approached the ranch again, Ethan felt a strange mix of nervousness and resolve. The moment he had been contemplating for days had arrived. He knew that this conversation would change his life in ways he could not yet predict. He also knew that honesty, empathy, and thoughtfulness would guide him, no matter the answer. With a deep breath, he set aside the tools of his trade, straightened his posture, and prepared to face the request head-on, aware that the quiet life he had always known was about to intersect with something entirely unexpected. Ethan woke the next morning with a heavy sense of thoughtfulness resting on his shoulders. The question Sarah and Michael had asked was not something that could be answered quickly or lightly. It lingered in his mind, weaving itself into every moment of his day. He went about his usual routine, feeding the cows, checking the water troughs, and repairing fences, but everything felt different. The familiar rhythm of ranch life, once comforting and predictable, now carried a weight of uncertainty. Each hammer strike, each careful step through the pasture, seemed to echo the question that had upended his simple world. He realized that the answer could not be based on impulse or politeness. To agree or to decline meant shaping not just his life, but the lives of Sarah, Michael, and potentially a child. The gravity of the request pressed down on him, heavier than any task he had faced on the ranch. He had mended broken fences, faced unpredictable storms, and handled animals in distress. But this was different. This was about human life, emotions, and responsibility in a way he had never confronted before. Ethan walked through the pasture, letting his thoughts flow freely. The morning sun warmed his back as he paused to watch the calves play, their small hooves kicking up clouds of dust. He smiled faintly, remembering the innocence and freedom of youth, and a pang of longing stirred inside him. He wondered what it would be like to witness the growth of a child, to guide them through the early years of life, to offer them the care and attention that he had always given to his animals. The idea brought both warmth and fear. He realized he had never truly considered being a parent, never imagined himself in that role. And yet, the thought sparked a quiet curiosity in him. Ethan retreated to his favorite thinking spot, a large oak tree at the edge of the pasture. Its thick branches provided shade and a sense of stability, and he often came here to reflect on decisions or simply enjoy the peace of the world around him. He sat on the rough grass, leaning against the trunk, and let the breeze wash over him. His mind wandered through memories of his childhood, long summer days running through the fields, helping his parents with chores, learning responsibility and patience. Life back then had been simpler, yet full of lessons. Ethan realized that those lessons were now guiding him, reminding him that responsibility was not something to fear but something to approach with care and thoughtfulness. He thought of Sarah and Michael. They had approached him with trust, courage, and hope, asking for something incredibly personal and profound. They were not demanding, not asking for charity. They were asking for a part of him, a willingness to share life in a way he had never considered. Ethan felt a deep respect for their honesty, but it also heightened his anxiety. Could he truly offer what they were asking? Could he navigate the complexities of human relationships, emotions, and the responsibilities of parenthood while maintaining the life he had built for himself? The questions tumbled endlessly in his mind. Over the next few days, Ethan began a kind of self-study. He walked through the fields alone, observing the animals and reflecting on his feelings. He thought about how he had cared for the livestock over the years, nurturing them, guiding them, and protecting them. Could some of those instincts transfer to human life? He wondered if empathy, patience, and dedication, qualities he had cultivated on the ranch, might help him rise to the challenge. At the same time, he feared the unknown. Human emotions were unpredictable, and raising a child involved far more than feeding and caring. It was about understanding, guiding, and forming deep bonds that could not be measured or rehearsed. Ethan also considered his own fears and insecurities. He had always been shy, reserved, and hesitant to share his feelings. Opening himself to others in this way, he realized, would require him to step outside the comfort of solitude. He would need to trust, communicate, and connect on a level he had avoided for years. That thought alone was daunting. Yet he recognized that growth often came from facing challenges that scared him the most. He could not know the future, but he could choose courage over avoidance. One afternoon, Ethan walked to the river that ran near the edge of his property. The water glistened in the sunlight, moving steadily over rocks and pebbles, never pausing, never fearing the unknown. He sat on a large stone and watched the flow, thinking about life and change. The river reminded him that life moves forward, regardless of fear or hesitation. To stand still, to refuse to engage, was to deny the natural flow of experiences and opportunities. Perhaps helping Sarah and Michael was a way to participate in that flow, to embrace life in a fuller, more meaningful way. Ethan spent hours reflecting. He imagined scenarios where he said yes, picturing moments of joy, laughter, and growth with the couple and a child. He also imagined saying no, picturing the disappointment, the missed chance, and the lingering what-ifs. Both visions carried weight. He realized that any decision would leave a mark on his life and theirs, and that scared him. Yet, he also understood that avoidance was not an answer. Silence was easier, but it would not honor their trust or his own integrity. During these contemplative walks, Ethan sometimes spoke aloud, sharing his thoughts with his dog, a loyal companion who had been with him for years. The dog listened silently, sitting patiently, as if understanding the gravity of the situation. Ethan found comfort in speaking aloud, organizing his thoughts, and acknowledging his fears. He recognized that part of being ready for a decision was understanding his own feelings and motivations. He also reflected on the values his parents had instilled in him: honesty, hard work, and kindness. They had taught him to care deeply, to approach responsibilities with thoughtfulness, and to consider the needs of others. Ethan realized that these lessons were guiding him now, helping him weigh the request not just with fear but with empathy and moral consideration. Perhaps his upbringing had prepared him, in ways he had not realized, for a moment like this. Evenings on the ranch became a time for quiet reflection. As the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Ethan would sit on the porch of his farmhouse, sipping a cup of coffee, listening to the gentle sounds of the night. Crickets chirped, wind rustled the leaves, and the stars appeared one by one. In these moments he allowed himself to imagine a life beyond solitude. He pictured small hands holding his, laughter echoing across the fields, and the warmth of shared experiences. The thought both frightened and inspired him. Ethan also thought about boundaries and limitations. He knew he could not promise to be perfect. He had never been tested in matters of human relationships to this degree. There would be mistakes, learning curves, and moments of doubt. Yet, he understood that love, patience, and dedication could help navigate those uncertainties. The willingness to try, to engage, and to support could be more meaningful than perfection. As the days passed, Ethan felt a subtle shift within himself. The fear that had once paralyzed him began to transform into curiosity and determination. He realized that life, no matter how predictable, would always bring unexpected challenges. His choice now was not about whether he could handle the unknown perfectly, but whether he had the courage to engage with it sincerely, thoughtfully, and responsibly. Ethan began to prepare himself mentally for the conversation he knew he would have to have with Sarah and Michael. He practiced expressing his thoughts honestly, organizing the questions he wanted to ask, and considering what he needed to know before making any commitment. He understood that communication would be key, and that openness and honesty would form the foundation of any future collaboration. One quiet morning, as the mist lifted from the pastures, Ethan felt a sense of clarity. He understood that the next step required courage, not certainty. He could not predict the outcome, nor could he fully prepare for every possibility, but he could face the moment with integrity, empathy, and respect for everyone involved. It was a difficult realization, yet a freeing one. He no longer felt trapped by indecision. Instead, he felt the power of choice. Ethan's reflection continued over several days, intertwined with the rhythm of ranch life. He repaired fences, fed the animals, and walked through the fields, all while thinking deeply about the responsibility, joy, and challenges that might lie ahead. Each task grounded him, helping him balance fear with reason, curiosity with caution, and empathy with self-awareness. He realized that the decision was not simply about helping Sarah and Michael, it was also a test of his own growth, courage, and capacity for love. By the end of the week, Ethan felt ready to face the conversation. He had reflected, explored his emotions, and weighed the potential outcomes carefully. He had confronted his fears, examined his values, and prepared himself to engage honestly. The shy, reserved man who had once avoided deep emotional involvement now recognized that life was calling him to step beyond his comfort zone. He understood that the choice ahead was monumental, but he also knew that courage often required stepping into uncertainty with sincerity and thoughtfulness. With that realization, Ethan felt a calm determination. He knew that he would soon speak to Sarah and Michael, sharing his honest thoughts, fears, and hopes. He was ready to listen to their perspectives, to ask questions, and to weigh the possibilities carefully. The quiet ranch, once a world of solitude, had become a space of reflection, preparation, and anticipation. Ethan understood that life, though unpredictable, also offered opportunities for connection, growth, and meaningful impact. And so, as the sun set over the fields, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Ethan felt a quiet courage stir within him. He knew that the days ahead would bring challenges, difficult choices, and deep reflection. But he also understood that facing them honestly, with empathy and integrity, was the first step toward a life that could be richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. After days of deep reflection, Ethan felt a mixture of nervousness and quiet determination. He knew the time had come to speak with Sarah and Michael. The question they had asked him was too important to leave hanging, and he could no longer avoid it. He spent the morning performing his usual ranch chores with unusual attentiveness, as if preparing himself physically and mentally for the conversation ahead. Each hammer strike, each step across the pasture helped him focus his thoughts and steady his nerves. As the sun reached its highest point in the sky, Ethan walked slowly to the farmhouse, brushing his hands on his worn jeans. He felt the familiar comfort of the land beneath his feet, but he also felt a flutter of uncertainty in his chest. Speaking honestly about such a personal matter was far more challenging than any physical labor he had ever undertaken. Yet, he understood that honesty, patience, and empathy were the only way forward. When Sarah and Michael arrived at the ranch later that afternoon, they carried with them the quiet energy of anticipation. They had noticed the change in Ethan over the past days, sensing that he had been deep in thought. Today, they would finally hear his response. The couple greeted him warmly, and for a brief moment the usual lightheartedness returned, easing some of Ethan's tension. Yet beneath the smiles there was an unspoken understanding. This conversation would be serious, emotional, and potentially life-changing. Ethan invited them to sit under the large oak tree near the pasture. Its branches stretched wide, providing shade and a sense of stability. They settled on a worn blanket he had placed on the grass, and Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing gently on his shoulders. He knew that the first words he spoke would set the tone for the entire conversation. "I've been thinking a lot about what you asked me," Ethan began, his voice steady but quiet. "It's not easy for me to respond because it's a huge responsibility. I've never been asked something like this before, and I want to be honest with you, with myself, and with what you're hoping for." Their eyes attentive, their hands resting on their laps. They had already sensed Ethan's deep consideration, and they were patient, allowing him the space to speak without interruption. Ethan continued, choosing each word carefully, knowing that clarity and sincerity mattered more than anything else. "I care about you both, and I respect your honesty and courage in asking me this," he said. "But I've spent my whole life in a quiet, solitary world. My days are filled with the ranch, the animals, and the routine that I've built for myself. The thought of stepping into a role that involves another human life, it's overwhelming. It's something I've never imagined for myself." Ethan paused, letting his words sink in. He glanced at Sarah and Michael, seeing the mixture of hope and nervousness in their eyes. He continued, "I want to help. I want to do something good and meaningful. But I also need to be honest about my fears, my limitations, and the fact that this is completely new to me. I don't want to promise something I can't fully understand or commit to without thought." Michael reached out, gently placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "We understand," he said softly. "We didn't ask this lightly. We know it's a lot to consider, and we respect the time you've taken to think about it. We're not expecting perfection, Ethan. We're asking for honesty, care, and willingness. That's enough for us." Hearing these words, Ethan felt a small sense of relief. The couple's patience and understanding lifted some of the weight from his shoulders. He realized that they were not asking him to be flawless, only to be present, thoughtful, and sincere. The idea of starting from honesty rather than pretending he had all the answers eased some of his anxiety. He took a deep breath and continued. "I've thought about what it would mean to help you, and I've imagined the responsibilities, the joys, and the challenges. I've also thought about how it would affect my life and the life I've built here on the ranch. I don't know everything, and I can't predict the future. But I do know that I want to try to approach this with care, respect, and thoughtfulness. I want to do what's right not just for you, but for anyone involved, including the child." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she reached out to squeeze Ethan's hand. "That's all we could ever ask for," she whispered. "We don't need perfect. We need honesty, kindness, and someone who cares. We already see that in you." Ethan nodded, feeling the tension in his chest ease slightly. He realized that the moment had shifted. The initial fear and uncertainty were giving way to a quiet sense of purpose and connection. He was no longer imagining the responsibility as a distant, abstract weight. He was beginning to see it as a potential journey filled with meaning, growth, and human connection. He continued, "I know this journey won't be easy. There will be challenges, questions, and moments of doubt. I will make mistakes, and I will need guidance. But I also believe that if we approach this together with communication, respect, and care, we can create something meaningful and positive. We believe that too. We're not asking for guarantees or certainty. We're asking for willingness, honesty, and an open heart. That's what matters most. And from everything we've seen, you have all of those qualities. For a moment, the three of them sat in silence, listening to the rustle of the leaves, the distant lowing of the cattle, and the gentle hum of the wind. The quiet was not empty. It was filled with understanding, trust, and a shared acknowledgement of the journey ahead. Ethan felt a sense of calm settle over him, a reassurance that this path, though unknown, was not one he had to face alone. "I want to ask something too," Ethan said after a while, his voice steady. "I want to understand your expectations, your hopes, and your fears. I want to make sure that if I step into this, I am doing it with clarity and understanding. I don't want to assume anything or make promises I can't keep. Can you help me with that?" Sarah nodded, her hand still resting on Ethan's. "Of course. We want this to be a partnership with honesty and trust. We'll share everything, our hopes, our struggles, and our dreams. And we'll listen to yours. We want this to be something we all step into together." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. The conversation, once so heavy and intimidating, had become a bridge of trust and understanding. He realized that the couple was not only asking for help, they were inviting him into a shared journey, one that required courage, patience, and compassion. They were offering him a role in something profoundly human, something that could bring purpose, joy, and growth into all their lives. He spent the next hour discussing details, asking questions, and sharing his thoughts. They talked about practical matters like the timing and responsibilities involved, and also about emotional matters like trust, communication, and mutual support. Ethan found himself opening up in ways he had never done before, expressing fears he had kept hidden and hopes he had never dared to voice. The conversation was honest, vulnerable, and deeply connecting. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the pasture, Ethan felt a profound shift within himself. The fear and hesitation that had dominated his thoughts for days were replaced by a sense of purpose, empathy, and cautious optimism. He realized that life, even in its quietest and most predictable moments, had a way of presenting opportunities for growth, connection, and meaningful impact. Finally, Ethan looked at Sarah and Michael, his voice calm and steady. "I want to do this," he said. "I want to step into this journey with you, thoughtfully and responsibly. I will need guidance, patience, and honesty from you, as well as from myself. But I believe we can make something meaningful together." Tears filled Sarah's eyes, and Michael's face lit up with relief and joy. They had feared that Ethan's shy, reserved nature might prevent him from embracing the idea, but his honesty, care, and willingness had shown them that he was capable of more than they had hoped. In that moment, the three of them shared a quiet understanding, a bond forged from honesty, respect, and mutual trust. Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him. The shy, solitary man who had spent years in the rhythm of ranch life had taken a brave step into the unknown. He was no longer just a caretaker of animals and land. He was preparing to become a part of something larger, a shared human experience, filled with joy, challenges, and growth. The decision did not erase his fears, but it transformed them into a source of motivation and purpose. As the evening shadows lengthened and the first stars appeared in the sky, Ethan, Sarah, and Michael remained under the oak tree, talking quietly and planning the next steps. The ranch, once a sanctuary of solitude, had become a place of connection, hope, and new beginnings. Ethan knew the road ahead would be difficult at times, but he also knew that he was ready to face it, guided by honesty, empathy, and the courage to embrace the unknown. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the quiet thrill of anticipation. Life on the ranch would continue, as it always had, with its daily rhythms and familiar routines. But now, those routines carried new meaning. Each sunrise, each task, each quiet moment would be shared in spirit with others, and one day with a child who would be the living proof of trust, courage, and love. In that quiet evening, Ethan realized something profound. Bravery was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. He had faced his own fears, confronted the unknown, and chosen to engage with life and humanity in a new way. The journey ahead would be challenging, unpredictable, and full of learning, but it would also be meaningful, rewarding, and deeply human. And as the stars twinkled overhead, Ethan felt the first true stirrings of hope, connection, and purpose, knowing that this decision, made with honesty and care, was the start of a life richer and fuller than he had ever imagined. After the heartfelt conversation under the old oak tree, Ethan felt a quiet but steady sense of purpose stirring within him. The uncertainty that had weighed so heavily on his mind for days had begun to transform into a sense of hope and determination. For the first time in a long while, he felt that his life on the ranch could be more than a routine of work and solitude. It could be shared, meaningful, and full of human connection. In the days that followed, Ethan, Sarah, and Michael began discussing the practical steps needed to move forward. They spoke about the process carefully, addressing questions and uncertainties, ensuring that everyone understood the responsibilities, challenges, and emotional commitment involved. Ethan listened intently, taking notes in his mind, asking questions, and expressing his concerns. He realized that while the path ahead was unknown, it was also an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to become someone who could give care, love, and guidance beyond himself. Ethan spent the mornings as usual on the ranch, tending to the animals and repairing fences, but each task now felt different. Feeding the cows, mending fences, and checking the water troughs were no longer just chores. They were exercises in patience, attention, and responsibility, all qualities he knew would serve him in the new journey he was about to undertake. Even the smallest moments, like brushing the horse's mane or filling the chicken coop, carried a sense of preparation, as if every action was shaping him into someone more ready to care deeply and consistently for others. Sarah and Michael visited frequently, helping with tasks on the ranch while also spending quiet moments talking with Ethan. Their visits became more than just friendly interactions. They were opportunities to share hopes, fears, and plans. The trio began to develop a rhythm, a trust that grew steadily with each shared task and conversation. Ethan began to realize that collaboration and communication were not threats to his quiet life, but rather ways to enrich it. The bond he was forming with the couple became a source of strength, comfort, and inspiration. Despite the progress, Ethan still experienced moments of doubt. The responsibility of helping bring a child into the world felt immense. He wondered if he could meet the expectations, if he could navigate the emotional complexities, and if he could balance his love for the ranch with this new role. These thoughts were natural, he reminded himself, and he did not need to have all the answers immediately. Growth, he knew, came from taking one careful, thoughtful step at a time. One afternoon, Ethan decided to take a long walk through the fields alone. The sun hung low in the sky, casting golden light across the pasture. He watched the calves play and the horses graze peacefully, feeling a deep connection to the life around him. He reflected on the conversations he had shared with Sarah and Michael, and he realized that this journey was not just about helping them. It was about discovering new capacities within himself. Courage, patience, empathy, and love were all qualities he had nurtured quietly over the years, and now they had a new purpose. During this walk, Ethan paused at the edge of a small pond near the barn. The water reflected the orange and pink hues of the sunset, calm and serene. He thought about the life ahead, about the lessons, joys, and challenges that a child would bring. He imagined teaching a young mind about the animals, the land, and the beauty of nature. He pictured the laughter of a child echoing across the fields, the small hands reaching out to learn, and the quiet moments of guidance, care, and reassurance. The vision filled him with warmth, hope, and a quiet sense of readiness. Ethan realized that his life on the ranch, once defined by solitude, could now be a place of connection and growth. The animals would still be cared for, the fences still repaired, and the fields still tended, but the rhythm of life would now include human bonds, shared experiences, and a purpose that extended beyond himself. The quiet he had cherished would remain, but it would be enriched by laughter, conversation, and shared responsibilities. Life, he understood, could be both peaceful and full of love. without losing the integrity of the world he had built. As the weeks turned into months, preparations continued. Ethan, Sarah, and Michael worked together, discussing schedules, responsibilities, and expectations. They researched and learned, asking questions and sharing knowledge. Each discussion deepened their trust, strengthened their connection, and clarified the roles they would play. Ethan's confidence grew steadily, bolstered by the realization that he did not need to be perfect. He only needed to be present, caring, and committed. During this time, Ethan began to notice subtle changes within himself. He was more open with his emotions, more willing to share thoughts, and more confident in expressing concerns or asking questions. The shy, reserved man who had once avoided personal conversations now found a quiet strength in honesty and vulnerability. He realized that growth often came from embracing fear, stepping beyond comfort, and allowing oneself to engage fully with life and others. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch of Ethan's farmhouse, the sky painted in brilliant shades of gold and lavender, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought of the unexpected question that had first been asked, the hesitation that had followed, and the reflection that had carried him to this moment. He realized that life's most meaningful journeys often began with uncertainty, and that courage, empathy, and honesty were the tools that allowed one to navigate the unknown successfully. Sarah reached out, placing a hand on Ethan's arm. "We're so grateful for you," she said softly. "We know this isn't easy, but you've shown care, thoughtfulness, and courage." "We couldn't ask for more." Michael nodded in agreement. "It feels like we're stepping into something special together. We'll face challenges, yes, but we'll also share joy, laughter, and growth. Thank you for being willing to take this journey with us." Ethan smiled, feeling the warmth of their words. "I'm grateful too," he said. "I've learned so much in the past weeks about myself, about trust, and about the power of shared responsibility. This journey will be new for all of us, but I believe it will also be meaningful, rewarding, and full of lessons we'll carry for a lifetime." The months passed, and life on the ranch continued with a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan, Sarah, and Michael developed routines and practices that balanced work, care, and planning. Every small step, from discussing timelines to organizing daily tasks, felt significant. Each shared moment strengthened their bond and prepared them for the journey ahead. Ethan discovered that life could be rich with connection without sacrificing the peace and simplicity he valued. One crisp morning, Ethan walked through the fields as the sun rose, casting soft light over the pasture. The animals stirred, and the world seemed calm and steady. He thought about the life that was coming, the child who would eventually be a part of their world. He imagined teaching them about the animals, exploring the fields together, and sharing the quiet beauty of nature. The thought filled him with warmth, joy, and anticipation. He also reflected on how much he had grown. The shy, reserved man who had once feared responsibility now felt capable of care, empathy, and thoughtful decision-making. He had faced his own fears, engaged with uncertainty, and chosen courage over avoidance. The ranch remained his sanctuary, but it had expanded into a space of connection, hope, and new beginnings. Life, he realized, was both stable and dynamic, anchored by routine but enriched by human relationships. As weeks turned into seasons, the ranch became a place of preparation and anticipation. Ethan continued his work with the animals, repaired fences and tended the fields, but his perspective had changed. Each sunrise, each task, each quiet moment carried new meaning. He was no longer just maintaining a ranch. He was preparing for a life that would include care, guidance, and love beyond himself. The solitude he once cherished now coexisted with connection, partnership, and hope. Evenings were spent in quiet conversation, planning, and sharing dreams. Ethan, Sarah, and Michael often sat under the oak tree, discussing hopes for the future, imagining the child who would join their lives, and reflecting on the journey they were undertaking together. The moments were filled with laughter, contemplation, and the deep satisfaction of shared purpose. Ethan realized that these moments of connection, though subtle and simple, were among the most meaningful of his life. One particular evening, as the sky darkened and stars began to appear, Ethan stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the animals settle for the night. He felt a deep sense of peace. The quiet ranch, once a world of solitude, was now a place of anticipation, love, and shared responsibility. He knew that challenges lay ahead, but he also knew that he was ready to face them with courage, patience, and empathy. The journey was just beginning, and he felt prepared to embrace it fully. Ethan understood something profound. Life's most meaningful moments often emerge from uncertainty, courage, and connection. The shy rancher who had once struggled to answer a simple question had discovered strength, empathy, and purpose in the process of reflection and honest conversation. His life, once defined by solitude, had expanded into a world of shared dreams, responsibilities, and hope. And so, as the stars twinkled overhead and the ranch settled into the quiet of night, Ethan felt a deep sense of anticipation. Life on the ranch would continue, as it always had, with its daily tasks and familiar rhythms, yet now those rhythms were filled with new meaning, hope, and the promise of connection. The journey ahead would be filled with challenges, learning, and growth, but it would also be rich with laughter, joy, and the profound rewards of shared human experience. Ethan smiled softly, feeling the quiet thrill of possibility. He knew that the path ahead would be unpredictable, full of lessons and surprises, but he also understood that he had taken the first step with honesty, courage, and care. The shy rancher who had once feared the unknown was now ready to embrace it, prepared to step into a life richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. The future was unwritten, but for the first time, Ethan felt ready to meet it. Not alone, but alongside people he trusted, respected, and cared for deeply. And in that readiness he found hope, courage, and a sense of purpose that filled the ranch, and his heart with a new light.